Hello. Hi, Toby.
Howdy.
I'm Callum. I'm a host of Let's Talk About Loss in Glasgow. And basically, Let's Talk About Loss is a social group, peer-to-peer to support. We kind of get together once a month and just kind of have a space to talk about, the difficulties of grief and how hard it is to talk to people who don't understand and things like that. We have Toby here today, who is the founder and CEO of the Robin Cancer Trust. So I'll throw over to Toby to introduce himself and that.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for hosting. So I'm the founder and CEO of the Robin Cancer Trust. We do testicular and ovarian cancer awareness in young adults. We do awareness education and support. But the reason I set up that charity is that I lost my brother, Robin, hence our name, to a rare form of testicular cancer when he was just 24 and I was a young pup. It seems many moons ago now, over 10 years, at just 22. So that's the beginnings of my grief journey, and that's why I'm here today.
How long was it after Robin died that you had this idea to start the charity, start the trust?
So it wasn't really discussed when he was unwell or when we knew he was dying. He just said, I don't want to be a photo on the wall, because we'd actually lost my uncle before I was born. When my mum was pregnant with Rob, my older brother was born then. So we knew what it would be. We knew what it was like growing up with someone that was never there, if that makes sense. And obviously, he was thinking about the next generation. So, talk about me, have a laugh. But the charity was never discussed. That came a few months after we lost him. And we just realized Rob was fit, healthy, health conscious, looked after himself really well, but he missed some really obvious signs and symptoms, fatigue, night sweats, bowel habit change, things that really should have been glaringly obvious. And we thought if he can miss them, anyone can. And there was just no information out there about this rare form of cancer. He had what's called a germ cell cancer. So he had a testicular cancer, but it was in his chest as a primary, very late stage, poor prognosis. And we thought, well, let's be that hub of information. Let's create something. And we've always said we wanted to create something that outlasts all of us. So something we can build as a legacy. Rob is the seed that has grown it, but it's all about the germ cell cancer community, as you guys are, building out peer-to-peer, lots of great people coming together for the cause and what you're trying to do, rather than just friends and family and everything. So that's what we do. We go out in schools, education. We offer some support now as well to our community.
I joined Let's Talk About Loss kind of with a similar ideal that I wanted to continue talking about my mum, not always in such a bad way. It'd been just over 7 years before I joined Let's Talk About Loss. And anytime I brought up my mum to my friends, it was always a bit like, oh no, is Callum going to start crying? What are we doing here? So the best thing about it for me has been able to, one, share my wisdom of grief for the newer grievers, and two, get to talk about my mum in a nice way, talk about the nice memories I have. It's been amazing for my family, actually, because I do this now. I talk about grief all the time. My dad always asks me how the group's going and things, and it's opened up such a wonderful dialogue between me and him, where initially we would barely talk about it at all. The more we talk about it, the easier it gets to talk about.
Absolutely. The destigmatization of it on a very sort of small level all the way up to the wider population level needs to happen. I think that's the best thing, isn't it? Because it's still so taboo, even within families, to talk about it. And it's there, and you're all grieving and hurting in your own ways. And it's so unique, isn't it? Everyone's grieving in their same ways, but there are themes that run through it, like talking helps, being the general one. And it just opens that door. And I think as with all things, it takes one person to be that catalyst. And I think it's amazing what you and, Let's Talk About Loss do, which is be that catalyst, both on social media and the meetups, building real, strong communities locally. And that's so important because, like you say, you're helping not only the new grievers, and that'll be helping their families because they'll be talking about it, but it's helped you so much, and your dad, because it's horrible shutting away the good times just because you don't want to maybe make someone else uncomfortable or affect their mood on that day, whether that's friends or family or a stranger.
But yeah, that's been the long-term biggest struggle for me. There was a long period of time where I could only focus on the bad things, and then once that crossed over to after a couple of years, I just wanted to talk about my mum all the time, but I could never really find the right space or the right time. If we were sitting at a pub drinking with my friends, it's not really the best time to be like, oh, that reminds me of this really funny story of my mum.
Because you're like, I think I might accidentally bum everyone out, but it's always there. And then you feel like the odd one out, don't you? Because you just want to tell a story or be sad or happy in that moment, but you're just like, I'm going to stay shut and quiet. And that's why it's so important to be around people that get it and have been there, because you can all have those conversations. It's like, I don't know, it's like talking therapy, isn't it? It's so important. You lost your mum to cancer as well, you said before we came on.
Yes, she died of breast cancer in 2013.
Must have been, you were quite young as well, obviously. I was young, but you were very young. So.
I was 16.
Very hard, never an easy age. Never going to say any age is easy, but very, very much the forming years, right? Must have been really difficult for your friends to support you, or know what to say, or
it was, it was such a whirlwind at the time that I had these drastic changes in perspective that happened so fast. Prior to her dying, and when I was at school, anytime the phone would ring in the classroom, my gut feeling was that's me being sent to the head teacher's office to be sent home because my mum's just died. Then as soon as she died, my perspective changed to, this is totally fine. This is not a problem. I'm totally sound. I'm still going to do well in my exams. It's not going to affect me. And then when the exam results came in and I did terribly, I was like, oh, do you know what? Maybe this is having a big effect on me. Yeah. But that was 6-8 months after she died, and because I'd been throwing out this stiff upper lip, get on with it mentality. I never asked my friends for any support in that time. I never asked anyone for any support in that time. The school weren't really offering any support, and I didn't ask for it. I denied speaking to the Macmillan cancer nurses. Then it just all kind of hit me in this one big thing with my exam results that do you know what? I've been completely done in by this. And then that was a big turning point for actually changing the way I dealt with it. And then I got into uni, did all right, but my biggest regret in that period was then I still didn't know how to talk about it to anyone. So I went to uni, made a whole bunch of new friends, but I didn't want to turn up and be like, hello, my name's Callum, my mum died when I was 16. But it was a good 3-4 months into uni, and I hadn't really mentioned it to anyone. And I kind of went back into that isolated mode where I didn't have these special circumstances that might make me upset from time to time, might make me not perform well from time to time. But once I got out of that, it was kind of a big change, and kind of led me in a kind of straight line to where I am now. I've been wanting to do something positive in my mum's name for such a long time, and because I'm a scientist. I can't write anything, or I can't, produce any art or anything like that. But what I can do is I can organize a meetup, and I can sit there, I can talk to people.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm sure. I haven't been to a meetup. I can envisage it's talk about it or don't talk about it. Right? We're at a pub, or we're at wherever you meet, and then it's, if you want to come out and cry a lot, everyone's going to be like, yeah, arm around your shoulder, let's listen. Or if you want to talk about the footy results, we'll have a bit of banter about that as well.
It's always really nice. Like, some people cry. Sometimes it does get very deep, but it's always quite, it starts off very lighthearted, and people want to talk more about the positive things and their memories rather than their difficulties.
Yeah, that's important as well, isn't it? I think being able to have time and space to focus on those, because a lot of death is all the negative, isn't it? And I think maybe sometimes we put a bit. Do you do this? I always feel this weird pressure to feel sad sometimes, and I'm like, I'm really not sad. This is really almost feels awkward. Like, my brother's, the death day, that has changed for me a lot over the years, and the change has been, I've got 2 young kids now, 4 and 1.5, and I've really noticed the day. My wife still says I'm a bit of an arse around that time, I can get grumpy and be a bit of a shit, but generally on the day, I'm not overtly sad. And I think, that's because we've got my brother's kids, my kids running around, and everyone, it's a different occasion. It's not as somber. And then I sort of get home and I'm like, should I cry now? And I think, oh, well, actually, no, because I'm not sad. And there's no pressure to feel that, is there? You can just enjoy the nice memories.
Yeah, I totally had that for a while. The the build up to the days, the build up to my mum's birthday, Mother's Day, Death Day, and Christmas. It was always like, oh my God, I'm going to be so sad on those days, and they're going to be so hard, and no one speak to me. Like, just going to stay in bed all day and wait it out, and I'll be totally fine the next day. And then that changed to, I wanted to do something nice on those days, and then I wouldn't be sad, and then I would kind of feel a little bit guilty of not being sad about it. But now, next stage past that, that's not what my mum would have wanted.
I often feel sadder just doing the washing up and thinking about texting my brother or something than I do standing at our family rose bush where there's 5 or 6 names. I'm like, all I can remember is when my granddad was buried here and the guy dropped the ashes thing in the rose bush and was digging around, and we all just wet ourselves. We're like, you're digging around in our dead granddad, this is so awkward. That's all I can think whenever I'm there, so it's not really a place of sadness. So I think, it's just about feeling it out whenever you feel it, isn't it?
Most of the time, the saddest parts are when I should, when I achieve big things, and the first thing I want to do is tell my mum. And even though it's been 9 years and I haven't called my mum in 9 years, well, I've never called my mum because I was living at home when she died. It's just the first thing I want to do. When this was arranged, first thing I wanted to do was call my mum and tell her I'm doing this thing. But so like those are still like the hard bits, and the last barrier I feel that I have is to enjoy the accomplishments and enjoy my own milestones without it being bittersweet.
There's always that thing, isn't there? There's always that juxtaposition. I've found that. I don't know if you ever find that balance. I think you become more comfortable with it, maybe. But the same. Married, Rob would have been one of my best men. Kids, all of that. You're like that. Those things are always balanced. There's always an absence at that point.
My brother got married a few years ago, and I was best man, and I gave my speech, and my sense of humor is very much the There's a couple of noticeable absentees. Can't believe my mum was late for her own son's wedding. And the room just fell silent, like complete dead. And I was like, oh no. I thought that was pretty funny.
So I think this is so important. This is one thing I don't think's talked about, because maybe we're all a bit scared to do this. And I may be throwing something out here that I just get lambasted for. How dark is your sense of humor around death? Because mine
it's very
right.
Yeah.
Same. So the cancer community is what I work with, who I support and advocate for. They can have a very dark sense of humor, and there's some fantastic Instagram accounts and whatnot, and memes and snarky humor gets a lot of people through a lot of rough times. And I think the same is for grief. But I think it's part of normalizing it, though. Like, I'll throw out some examples of the stuff we do at home. I hope my family aren't listening to this. I don't know how they feel about it, but like, me and my wife joke about it all the time. Like, it's a bit of just sort of a normalized joke where, if I don't want to do something, I'm like, but Alex, my brother died. And she literally just like, no, you can't. You've lived off that for 10 years. You cannot. But for us, it really helps normalize it. Like, we obviously have the healthy conversations about death and, with children and ourselves and whatnot. But that sort of real just taking the piss humor out of it. And I think that really helps. It helps me definitely just make it feel like it's okay to keep talking about it. And I think that's really important. If we're at the point where we can make really the sort of jokes you don't want to make in company. And when you do accidentally make them in company and they're like, and you're like, oh no, this is normal. This is normal for us. Don't worry about it.
What do you think makes it more difficult as a man to talk about grief? What extra challenges do we have that, not trying to push women aside at all, but what extra challenges do we have in our expectations of ourselves and each other that maybe women don't have?
We have a lot of toxic masculinity to try and sort of unpick. From this very young age, it just sort of divides into us internalizing, and it's so unhealthy, because as we know, the more you internalize, the more everything just becomes a horrible negative jumble. That's why meetups, talking about it, being open and honest about it helps. So I just think it's ingrained in us from a very young age to not open up and not talk about things. And, that takes a lot of undoing. The charities such as Let's Talk About Loss, absolutely fantastic. I think the more we can talk about educational, school level, normalizing these conversations and destigmatizing it, the better. So yeah, a lot to unpack, but I think there's a lot of issues with guys specifically.
If someone sat me down in school and was like, you have 10 friends, one of them in the next 10 years, something bad's going to happen to one of them. They're going to either have a parent who dies, parent who gets ill, sibling, something like that. Maybe a drug addiction, maybe a mental health problem, anything. Here's some tools that might help you support them. I would have absolutely dug into that class. I would have been like, I need to, although I wouldn't expect any of my friends to speak to me about it. that's the stage that's really the problem. But if if there was some kind of grief education that wasn't necessarily geared to how do you deal with it yourself, it's how you support other people, that will, one, make you better at supporting other people, and then you might find it easier to ask for support from someone who who's taken the same class as you.
That's so important. I think that's I hadn't thought that. I think it's a really interesting switch on supporting others, because actually your mate might be sitting there thinking exactly the same, and if you're going through it, he can then support you. And I think there are things people can learn massively. My biggest bugbear in the world is, let me know if there's anything I can do. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? That's the worst sentence. It's the most well-meaning but utterly useless sentence ever spoken.
Can you come and do my dishes, please? They've been really annoying me for days.
But a text saying, let me know if I can take the dog out, do the dishes, order you some food. Like, sometimes when you're in that horrible headspace, whether it's grief-based or not, you need someone to look after you, and you're not looking after just the very basics. So it doesn't need to be a big extravagant night out or anything like that. It's like, can I bring you Ben and Jerry's and we will watch a terrible movie? And it's that, I think it's people don't know where to begin. So, you know, everyone talks about being ghosted whilst they're going through this horrible period. I don't think ghosting is malicious. I think that's just our friends sitting around going, I literally have no tools. Like you've said, no tools on how to support someone. So I'll just wait till they're over it, but we never get over it. So if you're a million miles away, you've got the power of the internet to send care packages and stuff. Like, they do mean so much. But yeah, ghosting out of awkwardness is some not good.
If anyone's listening or wants to get involved with Let's Talk About Loss, wants to attend a meetup, the website is letstalkaboutloss.org. And then if you click on meetup at the top, it'll show you all the locations that we have. There is probably now upwards of 30, maybe even close to 40 locations around the UK. It'll tell you who to contact. And then if you send an email, you'll be invited along to the next meetup.